You would have just let it sit there. We needed it more than you did. That was my mother's response when I told her I knew what she'd done, that she'd drained my savings account and forged my signature on a second mortgage on the house I'd bought with my boyfriend Corbin while I was 1,500 miles away in Boston. I'm going to tell this from the beginning because I've explained it so many times in the past year that I've gotten good at laying it out clearly. My name doesn't matter. What matters is this. I'm 29 years old, I'm a veterinary pharmacology researcher, and for the past 18 months I've been living in Boston on a contract with a pharmaceutical company developing treatments for livestock disease. It sounds more interesting than it is. Mostly it's long hours, bad coffee from a hallway machine, and video calls home at 9 o'clock at night because I'm always too tired to call earlier. Before I left for Boston, my boyfriend Corbin and I bought a house together in Tulsa. I want to be clear about who Corbin is, because it matters to everything that comes after. He's 32, works in commercial insurance, and we've been together 4 years. We're not married yet, but the house, a 3-bedroom craftsman in a quiet neighborhood east of downtown, was our plan, our deposit on a future we'd been building toward together. We both put money in, both our names are on the deed. He moved into the house while I went to Boston, because one of us had to be there, and we agreed I'd come back when my contract ended. The house was not luck. I saved for 7 years. 7 years of tracking every purchase, skipping vacations I wanted to take, maxing out my retirement contributions, and doing freelance data analysis work on weekends to build up the down payment fund. It was the single most significant financial achievement of my adult life. My parents knew all of this. They were at the closing. My mother brought a plant for the porch. My father shook Corbin's hand and said he was proud of us. Now I need to tell you about my brother. Maddox is 34 and has never, to my knowledge, completed anything he started. He dropped out of college twice. He launched a landscaping business that folded after 2 seasons. He tried getting his real estate license, failed the exam 3 times, stopped trying. Last year, he put everything he had left into a food truck concept he called Southern Smoke, brisket, sides, a whole brand identity he'd designed himself. It lasted 4 months before the truck needed an engine replacement he couldn't afford, and the whole thing collapsed. The debt he accumulated in the process, I would find out much later, was somewhere around $42,000. His girlfriend, Nadira, is the kind of person who knows exactly what her wedding should look like before anyone has asked anyone anything. She talked about venue aesthetics on family calls. She sent my mother links to photographers. She described the engagement ring she envisioned with a specificity that suggested she had done significant research. And nobody pushed back, because in my family, you don't push back on things like that. You smile, you say it sounds beautiful, you hang up and look at the ceiling. I had no idea what was being planned. I had no reason to. The first sign was a bank notification I nearly swiped away. It came on a Thursday afternoon in October while I was annotating a set of trial results at my desk, the kind of alert I usually don't stop for. But the number made me look twice. Outgoing wire transfer, $18,500. Processed. I had not sent any wire transfer. I opened the app. The transfer had gone to an account I didn't recognize. I called the fraud line and sat on hold for 11 minutes, pacing the narrow strip of floor between my desk and the window, watching snow come down outside onto the street below. When someone finally answered, she told me the transfer had been authorized through my online banking using my credentials. She asked if I'd shared my login with anyone. I hadn't. I rotated my passwords every 90 days. I asked her to freeze the account. Then I called Corbin. He answered on the second ring. I could hear the television in the background, the familiar sounds of the house, and something about that, the realness of it, the ordinary Saturday afternoon of it, made my throat close before I said a word. Something's wrong with my bank account, I said. A wire transfer I didn't authorize. Almost $20,000. How? I don't know yet. I needed to tell you. Okay, he said, I'm here. Tell me what you need. I told him I'd call him back. Then I called my mother. She answered on the 4th ring, slightly distracted, like she was doing something else with her hands. Mom, I said, did you touch my bank account? The pause that followed was 2 seconds long. I have thought about those 2 seconds many times since. 2 seconds is enough time to realize she wasn't going to say, what are you talking about? 2 seconds is enough time to understand with absolute certainty that she knew exactly what I was asking. We had to, she said. Maddox needed help and we didn't have enough ourselves. You have savings, you're doing well up there. We figured you wouldn't notice right away, and by the time you did, we'd have explained it to you. The room tilted. You went into my account, I said. We still had your login from that time you asked Dad to check on something 2 years ago. He kept it written down. You went into my account and moved my money. It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple. My voice was calm. I have no idea how. Inside, I was standing in a field that had just been burned flat. How much? I said. The transfer was 18.5, but there's also, we need to talk about the house. Everything in my chest went cold. What about the house? A longer pause. The kind I remembered from childhood, the sound of my mother deciding how to say something she knows is going to break something. We took out a second mortgage, she said. We needed collateral. We used copies of your information. It came through for $46,000. I don't remember standing up. I remember that I was standing and the snow outside had stopped. I remember thinking, very quietly, that this was not an accident. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a decision that had been made, step by careful step, probably over weeks, with forged documents, a stolen password, and the calm certainty that I was too far away to stop it in time. You forged my signature, I said, on a mortgage on a house that also belongs to Corbin. We didn't think he'd need to be involved. His name is on the deed. You cannot take a second mortgage on a jointly owned property using only one person's signature. You didn't just steal from me, you committed fraud against him too. Silence. Where did the money go? I asked. Maddox's debts. And Nadira, they're trying to get a real start. She wanted something to show for the engagement, a proper celebration, something they could actually be proud of. Stop, I said. Please stop. I ended the call. I stood in that Boston office with the gray sky outside, and I made a decision I have never once questioned. I was not going to smooth this over. I was not going to let it become a family thing that got handled quietly and forgotten by the following year. I was not going to be the one who absorbed the damage, so everyone else could keep going like nothing happened. I called Corbin. I need you to listen to all of this, I said. Don't say anything until I'm done. I told him everything. The wire transfer. The password my father had written down 2 years ago and kept. The $46,000 second mortgage taken out on our house, using my forged signature and a copy of my ID they'd had on file from some old document I'd sent them years before. The food truck debts. Nadira's Fresh Start Fund. The 2 seconds of silence before my mother said we had to. When I finished, Corbin was quiet for a moment. They used your name on a jointly owned property, he said. Yes. Without my signature. Yes. That makes the mortgage fraudulent. Yes. Okay, he said, and the word had a particular quality to it. A stillness that wasn't shock anymore. When a person has already moved past being surprised and is now figuring out what to do. I'm calling our lender tonight, and I'm finding us a lawyer. I know. Corbin, I'm so sorry. Don't, he said. This isn't yours to apologize for. That was the moment I knew I'd bought a house with the right person. Over the next 2 days, the full shape of what my parents had done came into focus. Our mortgage lender confirmed that a second mortgage application had been submitted and processed using documents that included what appeared to be my notarized signature. When their fraud team examined it, the notary stamp turned out to be a copy, lifted from a legitimate old document of mine and digitally inserted into a new one. It wasn't sophisticated work. It was the kind of forgery that succeeds when nobody's paying close attention, which is exactly how it had succeeded. The application had listed Corbin as co-owner but had not included his consent or signature, which under state law and our original mortgage terms made the second loan invalid. Once Corbin filed a formal objection and I submitted a fraud report, the lender began an internal review. The phrase federal bank fraud entered my vocabulary and took up residence there. My phone filled up. My mother called 6 times the first day. I answered none of them. She left voicemails that moved through phases, explanatory, then defensive, then tearful, and then, on the 5th message, something that made me press pause and listen 3 more times. You are going to blow up this entire family over money. Maddox has been struggling for years, and you've been up in Boston living your life, and you never once offered to help. All we did was what you should have done yourself. If you were a real sister, none of this would have happened. If you were a real sister. I've turned those words over many times since, examined them from different directions, the way you do with something you're trying to understand. What I keep arriving at is that she meant it. She genuinely believed that my savings, my home, the years of careful work behind both of them, were resources that should have been available to my brother, and that my failure to offer them freely was the real moral failure in the situation. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a belief system. And there is no conversation that fixes a belief system. My father called once, no message. Maddox texted, Mom says you're freaking out. Can we just talk? I didn't respond. 3 days after I'd frozen my account, I got a call from the lender's fraud department. The second mortgage had been suspended, and the case referred to federal investigators. They asked if I would cooperate. I said yes. That same afternoon, a number I didn't recognize called. I picked up. It was Nadira. "I want you to know I had nothing to do with this," she said. "Your parents offered the money. I didn't ask them to do anything illegal." "Did you know where it was coming from?" A pause. I knew they were helping Maddox. "Did you know it was my money?" Longer pause. "I didn't ask questions," she said. "Okay," I said. "That's your answer." I hung up. The federal investigation moved faster than I expected. The forgery wasn't difficult to establish. The copied notary stamp, the mismatched documents, the IP logs showing my accounts had been accessed from my parents' home network on 3 separate occasions. The bank records showed exactly where everything had gone. $18,500 wired to Maddox directly, $14,000 to a venue deposit for his engagement event. The remainder split between his creditors and a lump sum to Nadira's personal account. The memo line reading, and I'm not making this up, fresh start. My parents were charged with bank fraud, forgery of private documents, and unauthorized access to a financial account. Federal charges. When I heard the formal list read aloud on a call with my lawyer, I was in my Boston apartment on a gray November evening, watching rain hit the window. I felt something that surprised me, which was not anger. I was past anger, but a kind of exhausted clarity. Not relief exactly. Just the feeling of something that had been suspended, finally landing on solid ground. The part people always ask about when I tell this story is what happened with Maddox and Nadira. Once the investigation became a matter of public record, Nadira's family found out. Her parents, who had planned to contribute to the wedding, pulled back immediately. They wanted no proximity to a federal fraud case. The venue refunded the deposit. Maddox's creditors, seeing an opportunity, accelerated their collection timelines. He lost the storage unit where he'd been keeping the salvaged equipment from the food truck. 6 weeks after the charges were filed, Nadira ended the engagement. She sent him a text. He forwarded it to me without comment. It said, "I love you, but your family is a catastrophe, and I'm not signing up for that." I genuinely don't know how to feel about Nadira. She accepted money that came from fraud and asked no questions. She also left the moment it cost her something, which tells you what you need to know about what she was actually willing to give. I've decided not to spend any more time working that out. Maddox called me 2 weeks later, I answered. "I didn't know they were going to do that," he said. "Did you know they were looking for money to give you?" I knew they were trying to help. "Did you ask where it was coming from?" A long silence. "No," he said. That's what I thought. I don't hate my brother. I have spent years watching him move through the world without ever quite landing in it, and I understand, probably more than he knows, what it feels like to need help and not know how to build something that holds. I understand that. But understanding somebody doesn't mean you absorb the consequences of their choices. I told him that. He didn't have much to say. Before we hung up, he said he was sorry. I told him I heard him. We haven't spoken since, but I haven't closed the door either. I just haven't opened it yet. My parents were convicted 9 months later. I flew back to Tulsa for the sentencing. Corbin drove me to the courthouse. We didn't talk much on the way there. We've been together long enough to know that some things don't need words around them. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined. My mother sat very still while the verdict was read. My father kept his eyes on the table in front of him. The judge spoke at length about the nature of financial fraud, about the specific injury of crimes committed within families, about the deliberate and sustained character of what had occurred. Then she handed down the sentence. 18 months each, federal minimum, with 2 years of supervised release and full financial restitution ordered. My mother cried. My father still did not look up. I watched them and I felt something I had not expected. Not satisfaction, exactly. Not the clean relief I'd thought I would feel. What I felt was grief, not for what they had done, but for some version of them I must have believed in more than I'd realized, the version that would not have done this. Grieving a thing that never actually existed is a strange and weightless kind of loss. There's nothing to hold on to when you reach for it. I left the courthouse with Corbin's hand in mine. We drove back to the house. Our house, still ours. The second mortgage had been voided months earlier, the forged documents flagged and removed from record, the lender satisfied. The craftsman house with the porch plant, still alive. A little scraggly from the winter, but alive was exactly what it had always been. My Boston contract ended 6 weeks after the sentencing. I moved back to Tulsa on a Wednesday in November, drove down the street I'd been thinking about for 18 months and pulled into the driveway. Corbin was already home. The lights were on inside. The porch plant had grown. On my first morning back, I stood in the kitchen making coffee while Corbin sat at the table, and the light came through the window at the angle it always does in autumn, and the house was quiet, and I thought, this is the thing they tried to take. This specific, ordinary, unremarkable moment. This is what they decided they needed more than we did. They didn't get it. A few months after the sentencing, a letter arrived. Return address, the federal facility where my mother was serving her sentence. The envelope was thin. The letter inside was 2 pages, written in the careful, deliberate print she uses when she wants to make sure she's understood. She wrote that she had been assigned to a financial accountability program. She wrote that the program required her to describe, in detail, exactly what she had done and exactly why, and that the describing had been harder than the arrest. She wrote that she understood now, really understood, not as an explanation, but as a fact she could not talk her way around, that she had not been helping Maddox. She had been stealing from me and telling herself it was the same thing. I read it twice. I set it on the kitchen counter. I made tea. I haven't written back yet. I don't know if I will. Some distances take longer than a letter to cross, and I'm not in a hurry to cross this one before I'm ready. What I know is simpler than any of that. The house is mine and Corbin's. The savings account, slowly rebuilt over these past months, is mine. The years of careful and glamorous work that built both of those things are mine. None of it was ever theirs to give away. My mother told me I would have just let the money sit there, as if saving it, as if it growing quietly in an account, as if it belonging to the person who earned it, as if all of that were a failure of love. I think about that sometimes, usually in the mornings when the light comes through the kitchen window and Corbin is at the table and the house is still. I think about it, and then I let it go. I drink my coffee, I go on. That's all there is. That was always all there was.